So you mentioned there's different verticals, like you said, healthcare, insurance, stuff like that. Which one from your experience you think was the best, like worked for you? Was it just the government contracts or was it a blend of each vertical?
Hands down, the government stuff is the most lucrative, right? Um, and because if you kind of think about it like this, like the government has the largest accounts payable globally. The U.S. government has the largest accounts payable of any operation or organization or entity on the planet. That they spend ridiculous sums of money, and a lot of that money is spent in contracts, right? And that's why small business is so important in the U.S. because small business, even large businesses, they do a lot of business with the government through contracts, and so so those opportunities are the most lucrative, the most profitable. Um, but they require work. Just like going and getting those yeses, requires some work. This is not too dissimilar, right? So it requires some knowledge and some work, and then some execution on the front end to put yourself in position to get those opportunities.
Gotcha. So off these government contracts, how much on average can a person make if they got a contract from the government for, is it
Well,
depending on the
actually,
doors or is it, I'm not sure how that works.
it depends on a couple of different things. So it'll depend on the opportunity. And so what you have is you have the agencies. So I'll just pick one, like Department of Defense, right? Department of Defense. Under the Department of Defense or under the department, there's a specific agency in that department that is responsible for writing the contract, right? So they're putting the whole contract together, the scope of work, the whole 9 yards. Okay. And then within that agency, there's a single individual, which is called the contracting officer, that is responsible for the failure or success of that contract, right? Once it gets awarded and making sure that it performs properly and this and that, right? So the contracting officer is the single sole person representing the government that is over that contract, right? And so it depends on the size of the contract can depend on a number of different variables, right? Um, but and it also depends on whether you have a direct contract, your entity in the government, that's called a prime contract, or one similar to what I was describing, which is more of a subcontract opportunity where another larger company is holding a big contract and you come up under them and provide a piece of your service in a subcontract capacity, right? And so it depends on those types of things. But to answer your question more specifically, I've seen opportunities that they could easily 5 figures, and I've seen opportunities that are 7 figures, right? So I'll give you an example. I have a colleague up in the Northeast. He landed a contract that was a 1 year contract with a 5 year auto renewal, which is not uncommon with the government space. So it was a 1 year contract. It was for 3 million for that 1 year, but it was a 5 year auto renewal. If they performed successfully that first year, the auto renewal did kick in. It turned to a 6 year, $18 million opportunity, right? And it took 37 doors to fulfill the scope of that contract, and that was it. 37 doors. And so that can give you an idea of what's possible, right? And there's other opportunities. Recently I was working with someone for opportunity out in Oregon. Because people think, oh, these have to be in urban areas. No, they're all over, right? So this opportunity was in Oregon. It was through the Department of the Navy. It was a 5 year opportunity. It was a multi 7 figure deal. So it depends. It could be a smaller one. It could be a $50,000 deal that could only last like 4 to 6 months, right? But you can turn that down. You know what I'm saying? So it depends is the answer. But they can get pretty high.
Holy crap. 37 doors, 18 million. Congrats to that person. Wow. So how do you like, didn't they have to have the 37 doors in order to like bid for that, obviously? Like it wasn't just like, oh, like let me get the contract, let me go try to get 37 doors.
That's exactly what happened. They got the deal first and then went and got the doors to fulfill it.
Well, like how? How do you get 30 no, like how do you get 37 doors? Like I'm sure
Yeah,
you're
it
on the
was a
time
multi it was a
frame,
multifamily. It was a multifamily deal. So they
multi-family deal,
they
so you probably have to
yeah,
go talk to.
yeah, they
Okay,
had to go through a multifamily channel, to be
gotcha.
able to get the doors to fulfill the contract. But see, here's the thing, because this is what we've done too. So the first the one I explained earlier, with the positive mechanics, that was our first one. The second one was the reverse of that. where the opportunity came first, then the doors came. But here's the deal. That's an entirely different conversation when you're bringing to a multifamily property owner a multi-year, very lucrative deal, right? Where they're not having to worry about their occupancy for a while, right? And then when they get ready to go sell the asset, if they sell it while the contract is still in place, that's good for them and that's good for the buyer. So then it becomes a win-win-win. So it's a totally different conversation when you're bringing a deal to the community as opposed to having the doors, then go and try to find a deal.
Holy crap. Obviously you gotta show proof of funds before you start talking to these owners and stuff like that,
Yeah, well,
probably.
so here's the thing. So you can do a deal. You can get the doors contingent on getting the contract, right?
Mm.
And so the way it would work is essentially a lease would only kick in and become viable once you have the contract with the government. Once it's a done deal and it's inked and you get it, then at that point the lease kicks in, right? So the communities aren't worried about like, do you have the funds to fulfill the length of this contract, because the government contract itself is what is going to fulfill that financial obligation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Holy
it's a different
crap.
conversation at that level.
Wow. Yeah, big opportunities apparently. Whew. You already answered my question about how long the contracts. It varies. 4 months, 6 months, multi-year, depending on if you hit the quota.
Yep.
I'm guessing the government, just like anyone else, they ACH or direct deposit you the funds, not
Yep.
check or
Yep.
anything.
Yep, you chip. Yep, chip. We're gonna get those deposited. Now here's one thing I will say, because a lot of people don't understand this on the front end. So the government typically pays in arrears. Okay, so that means that you're not gonna get your money up front for that first 30 days worth of stays, right?
Oh,
So yeah, so that's when it comes in handy to negotiate with the community that first month or two off, where you're not paying that first month or two, because the government's going to pay you in arrears. They're going to pay you 30 days in arrears through the life cycle of the contract, right? And so if
mhm.
you're in a situation where you got, 2 dozen doors and you got to get those furnished and ready to go and online, and you got 8 weeks to do it, and you're not going to see a check, until 30 days after they get there, that can create an issue. So you need to understand that up front. The government does pay 30 days in arrears.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. And what percentage do you think with your business or anyone that like doing the same thing you're doing, is OTA, government contracts, and direct booking, however you want to word it?
Yeah, so ours is over 95% because we those other verticals that I described, like that's a lot of the make up the business too. So only two of those opportunities are those contract opportunities. The rest of those are in and among those other verticals. And so you're talking 42 doors, three of them remaining on the OTAs, and the rest all direct.
Oh, wow. So you said some are government contracts, some are healthcare. How would someone get into the healthcare like space of that? Is it just networking as well, like online with events
Yeah,
or?
so good question. So when we started, of course we know a lot more now, but when we started, we just started walking into hospitals and saying, "Hey, this is who we are. This is a product and service we provide. We know that you have." Now let me back up a little bit, because I did have a little bit of knowledge, um, pre STR business about how it kind of works. So I sold into that space, right? The healthcare and higher education space. And so one of our first opportunities was working with a school of medicine at a university. Um, and so these postgraduate students were in medical school, but they're responsible for providing their own housing at that level, right? And so that was one of our first opportunities. But then we were made aware of the whole traveling nurse thing through that channel, right? And so I knew about medical students and their housing needs, which is really kind of where we cut our teeth on the healthcare. But on the heels of that, we learned about this traveling nurse. I didn't know that was the thing, right? Until I was in this space and we were catering to students. And so then we were like, well, we just need to go to hospitals and find out how we can get these traveling nurses to come to come stay with us. I mean, so that's how we started. We started by walking into hospitals, going, talking to HR, talking to the charge nurses, talking to these different people. Fast forward, as recently as last year, I learned about another aspect dealing with the agencies directly. My friend Jesse Vasquez, he's on Instagram. He teaches that whole play with the dealing with the healthcare placement agencies, and they're placing these traveling healthcare professionals and covering their housing at a premium, right? And so during COVID, when everybody was getting some action from the healthcare space, we got our fair share too, because there was so much activity in that space. But then people don't realize also in healthcare, there's other demographics of healthcare, right? Then you get on the patient side. Right. So what happens is you have patients a lot of times that are having these long-term health procedures done. Maybe they're battling cancer, whatever the case is, and their families are coming into town or coming into the community for months at a time because they want to be there with their loved one, and they need furnished accommodations. They don't need an empty apartment or empty house that they got to go out and fill up. They need furnished accommodations. They're already dealing with the illness of a loved one or something like that. And so that is not a burden they want to take on, is moving in somewhere, getting housing. So a lot of them are staying in hotels, unfortunately. And so there's a very unique niche opportunity in the healthcare space by accommodating those families, supporting those loved ones that have terminal illnesses and things, and also children's hospitals. That's a huge one because children will be in the hospital for lengthy periods of time, and their parents typically have to find accommodations on their own. So you could partner with like Ronald McDonald houses, place like that, in different children's houses. And a lot of times there's organizations that will help them pay for or offset those accommodation costs, and they'll pay you directly as the host. So there's a lot of action within the healthcare space, and that's just one, right? Higher education is another. And I'm not necessarily talking about like student housing, although we have engaged with international students and very successfully, but more so talking about like faculty and staff, right? So you have faculty that will visit and staff that will visit a campus, not visit, but they will come during an academic semester or an entire academic school year, but they don't live there. Right. And so they're traveling in to teach for that specific period of time. You have doctoral candidates, research assistants, graduate level students.